Welcome back, fellow sleuths. I know it's been a minute since we talked some From, or anything for that matter, because we've been gone for a while. But with season 4 right around the corner, premiering on April 19th, there is no better time for us to jump back in and story walk ourselves through what we know. So, in this video, we're going to take a closer look at our trapped townspeople, old faces and new, and talk about where we think they're headed in this new season. And we're going to kick it off with our new arrival, Sophia, played by Julia Doyle, who is described as a sheltered and vulnerable pastor's daughter. Now, making predictions for a new character this early is like playing darts blindfolded. But hear me out. She could be our second really religious character. Father Kadri was the even-keeled, stabilizing force of the town, and Sophia could end up being the inverse. The theory is she may be the Mrs. Carmody of From. For those who haven't read Stephen King's The Mist or seen the movie with that ending, which still sticks with me years later, Mrs. Carmody is a fanatic who convinces everyone trapped in the grocery store that the monsters are divine punishment. She breaks down the logic and the teamwork that the heroes of the story are trying to build and creates a dangerous sacrificial cult. And honestly, she wouldn't be building this congregation alone. I mean, look at Elgin. Elgin's already primed for this. He became a zealot for the kimono lady, convinced she is an angel sent to save them rather than another nightmare entity. So if Sophia starts preaching that monsters are part of a divine plan, Elgin is going to be sitting in the front pew. And we already know the writers of From wear their Stephen King influences on their sleeve. So bringing in a Carmody archetype to destabilize the town from the inside would be another King homage, proving that sometimes the people on the inside are more dangerous than the monsters and the things on the outside. So the season 4 prediction is this fits perfectly into the idea that the man in yellow is ready for chaos. He wants the townspeople to become the monsters, willing to sacrifice each other for survival, and if that turns out to be the case, then Sophia just might be the match that lights that fuse. Speaking of lighting the fuse, let's pivot to the character who could potentially be the most impactful piece on the board, Julie. But we need to clarify her new role. She isn't a time traveler, she's a time tourist. And those seizures, they could just be her mind trying to process the data as she astral projects through the town's history. But remember the rules. According to Ethan, she can't pull it back to the future. So we need to think of it less like Marty McFly and more like Groundhog Day. Phil Connors can't stop the blizzard or save the homeless old man. Those are fixed points. However, he escapes a loop not by fixing the event, but by changing himself. So Julie isn't there to edit the script. She's there to wake up the actors. So what about season 4 predictions for Julie? Well, we saw future Julie tell Jim that this is when it happens. Now this line suggests that in the future, she has learned to use her abilities at least a little bit. Hopefully we get some sort of training arc or training montage, and we get to watch her navigate the timeline and get better at her abilities, reduce the seizures where she can do this without being detected, and become more of a story Jedi. It would also be very interesting to see how many other events she may have influenced between this cycle and past cycles. And hopefully, we get a glimpse of why the monster in season 1 asked if she remembered him, and maybe we get to see their interaction if there ever was one at all. So if Julie is the hero learning the ropes, who is she up against? The man in yellow, who isn't just a monster, he's the manager. And actually, let's take it a step further, because if I'm buying into my own theory about the Wheel of Life, which we'll dive deeper into in an upcoming video, stay tuned, then the man in yellow is Yama. And for those of us not up to date on our Buddhist cosmology, Yama is the Lord of Death. He is a fearsome figure. He's depicted by actually holding the Wheel of Life in his claws, and he judges the souls and, most importantly, keeps the cycle spinning. So if our friend Smiley and the other monsters are the guard dogs, Yama is the warden. His ability to move in the daylight suggests that he operates on a higher frequency than the usual suspect monsters that we're used to seeing. So what about season 4? Well, in the trailer, he says, "This is my favorite part." And as chilling as that was, why is it his favorite? Well, for me, it's because this is the moment the town turns on itself. I think he's going to ramp up the psychological warfare by showing up in broad daylight, maybe dumping Jim's body right in the street, and leaving without hurting anyone else. Just a cryptic warning. And what's the goal? Straight intimidation. To offer another monkey's paw deal to anyone desperate enough to take it, just like he did cycles and cycles ago. Then unfortunately, that brings us to Jim. Now, I know some of you were hoping for a last-minute save. And I know a lot of you were probably popping champagne when he fell, because let's be honest, he was a little bit much at the end. But regardless of which camp you fall into, Jim's death was a necessary purge for the narrative. Every cycle needs archetypes, right? A skeptic, a leader, a mother. Jim was the logic, the engineer, the rational thinker. But here's the kicker. The role only is useful when the experiment is running smoothly. Once Tabitha and Jade finally broke free, cracking the code, changing the variables, it triggered the arrival of the man in yellow. And in this new chaotic reality, the logic role becomes obsolete. But his death could become the springboard for more chaos. Think of the town like the Overlook Hotel in The Shining. Yes, another King work and a phenomenal movie, one of my favorite horror movies of all time. The location itself is a character. It throws up roadblock after roadblock to keep people locked in the cycle until they break and succumb to their inner evil. We even see Jack Torrance, the main character of the movie, at the end in the 1921 photo, hinting very strongly that he's always been part of the hotel. So for seasons, Jim has been the character keeping Tabitha and the kids in the logic box. He was the wall preventing Tabitha from evolving. But was Jim fate or choice? Was Jim put in the position by the town to keep Tabitha from exploring her deeper thoughts? Or was she subconsciously drawn to this archetype to protect herself from digging too deep into her own memories, a hole she shouldn't have been digging? What we do know is that Henry, Victor's dad, is pretty darn close to being a Jim variant. Both had alcoholic fathers, neither listened to their wives. Henry even tells Jim explicitly, "You remind me of myself, listen and shut up." But there was a difference. Jim decided to break the cycle. When offered the shot at the bar, Jim refused again. Henry, who conversely drank away his pain. So maybe this version of Jim moved the needle just a little bit closer to breaking out of the loop that he's always in. So here's the season 4 prediction. Jim won't be gone. Expect his trauma to be recycled. The town's very good at that. The town is not going to waste a perfectly good can of nightmare fuel. I'd imagine that the phone rings, Tabitha picks it up this time, and it's Jim's voice, but he's not alone. He's now with the fake Thomas, both telling her that she couldn't save her children in any of the timelines. Now let's move on to Boyd. Now, usually, when things go south, everyone looks towards the sheriff, but this time, Boyd might not be able to hold the line. I'm kind of theorizing that Boyd's facing a mutiny, which may not be a surprise for most of you with the way the season ended. But with Jim's death and the man in yellow possibly appearing as a daywalker in town, the town's faith in Boyd's leadership, which is already at an all-time low, will likely shatter. I'd expect some sort of coup, a vote of no confidence likely led by Acosta and or Kenny. And I think this will happen when word breaks that not only did Fatima kill Tilly, but Boyd hid the truth. Again. And this leadership vacuum might be exactly what Sophia would need to switch the town from logic to superstition. And speaking of superstition, the knowledge that Fatima gave birth to a monster. Now this paints her in an inverse Mary and opposite Our Lady of Fatima light. This realization would most likely amplify any kind of change from logic to superstition, potentially leading to more of a full-blown witch trial scenario as the man in yellow's chaos really starts to rain down on the town. So here's the prediction. Obviously, Boyd won't be killed. That would be some wild Game of Thrones stuff. It would be totally nuts. But he and Ellis could lose this fight. And I wouldn't be surprised if the season ends with the Stevens men exiled from the town that he tried to save this whole time. Now let's move on to Tabitha, the identity crisis. While the town is imploding, let's talk about the one who got out, or at least tried to for a little bit. Now, the reveal that Tabitha is a reincarnation of Miranda, Victor's mother, is the show's biggest pivot yet. And the fact that she and Jade now know Nkui means remember, and with the loss of Jim, Tabitha could become obsessed. She might center entirely on recovering Miranda's memories, potentially to the detriment of Ethan and Julie. They're going to be going through it themselves. Ethan especially, he was already struggling. So Jim's brutal death will definitely affect him, and maybe even change him to more of the darker side of the spectrum. I mean, if you're Tabitha, imagine the headspace she's in, being hit with the idea that the you understand is totally wrong. She's bouncing between personas, struggling to know which memories are hers. And we aren't just talking about the last cycle with Miranda. We could be talking about dozens of past lives. Essentially, it's a demolition derby going on in her mind right now. And we know about at least 3 of those past lives. The one where she was a child and something scared her coming from the sky, the fact that Miranda exists, And she was one of the initial residents that lost the child that we meet at the end of season 3. What's interesting, though, is the fact that Miranda was able to have a painting of the man in yellow from memory, because in the flashback that we saw, she died before meeting the man in yellow. I don't think he had come out. They haven't gotten to that part of the story yet, which means at least one of the many past lives they've shared met the man in yellow face to face. And I would assume that her relationship with Victor is going to be one of the emotional core and conflicts of the season, because she's not just his friend or his caretaker now. She's the mother he's waited 40 years for. This connection might be the key for Victor to finally come home, quote unquote, mentally. And because it is the key, you can bet the man in yellow or the town itself will try to put the kibosh on it by drawing her back into herself with visions of Jim and failures of her past lives in order to keep them apart. The prediction would be the boy in white, who clearly knew this was the deal the whole time, may finally speak a little more openly about what happened, what he really said to Christopher, and why it mattered now that the players in the game are ready to listen and understand what's happening. Speaking of Victor's family, let's talk about the ghost in the machine, Victor's sister, Eloise. Look, I get it. There are plenty of you listening right now saying, Chris, she's dead. Let Eloise theories die too. But to me, she's the queen on this chessboard, and I think there are two distinct ways her story could play out. Theory 1. She's a master story walker. In this version, she didn't die in the massacre. She slipped into a different chapter, likely with the help of the boy in white. She's been living in the margins of the timeline, becoming her own Jedi story walker, basically where Julie's trying to get to. And one more thing to note is that Ethan and Victor seem to have a connection. They both seem to play the same role as the storyteller and the narrator of what's going on, although Victor's definitely more cagey about it. So it would make sense that Tabitha / Miranda's female children, Eloise and Julie, both play a similar role as story walkers. Theory 2. She's the hide-and-seek champion. This is a more grounded physical theory. Victor tells us specifically that Eloise was the best at hide-and-seek. That is not a throwaway factoid, that's a survival skill. That night, she stumbled into the one place the crows and the monsters seemingly can't go, past the scarecrows. She realized it was some sort of safe zone, a glitch on the map, and she stayed there this whole time. And why hide? Because she assumes Victor is dead, and there is apparently food and shelter there. But now, she sees new people arrive in the area, and she assumes it could just be the town trying to trick her into coming out, making it a strong possibility that it's her creating those sounds that Kenny and Jim heard when they were out there in the cabin. So what about season 4? Well, I'm thinking eventually Victor or his father Henry will wander near this quote-unquote safe zone, if that's even what it is. And that may be the trigger to finally draw her out after seeing two people that she knows. And hopefully when she comes out, she's bringing 40 years of observational knowledge with her. This brings us to Jade, going down the rabbit hole. With Tabitha dealing with her identity crisis, it leaves Jade, and Jade is a tricky one. Jade is the mirror image of Tabitha, but without the anchor. He has no family, or husband, or kids, or anything to anchor him to the town. He's likely struggling with the same reincarnation identity crisis she is, but he lost Toby right off the bat, and he's struggled to shake that lone wolf persona ever since. Given his obsessive personality, and with nothing to hold him back, you have to suspect that he'll go full speed down the rabbit hole trying to recover all of the memories. But here's the question. How much of their personality carries over? Was the original Jade, the first Jade, essentially the same, or has he improved over the cycles? Was the original event a repercussion of his hubris? Because he's got a lot of it. And does he need to work through that to solve the full puzzle? For a season 4 prediction, Jade's a wild card. For me, he has the least clear path this season, meaning he has the most room for surprise. So while everyone else is fighting each other, Jade might be the only one fighting with himself. Now let's wrap it up with Victor, the ultimate witness. The man who's been there the longest. For decades, Victor survived by suppressing memories. In season 4, hopefully, he will help Tabitha / Miranda and let that wall officially drop. We already know Victor is essentially a hard drive. We know his drawings have always been crucial, but there are some that stand out more than others that we haven't decoded yet. The bird's eye view of an island, the pale white alien-like figure, the spiders, very large spider under the ground, the snow globe, and there's a colored playground equipment that Ethan and Sarah would spin on that sync up with the faraway trees as some sort of portal wheel of life situation. But according to him, these all came from something he saw and didn't want to forget. So he didn't lose the memories for good, he just kind of filed them away. The question is, how did he see some of the things from the perspective that he drew them? So in season 4, hopefully with his newfound family, Tabitha and Henry, we may finally get the context about those abstract drawings. Maybe the boy in white gives us some more information, or Victor finally comes out of his shell and we can see how he could see things from a bird's eye view. But look, that is just how the pieces look on the board from where I'm sitting. What do you think? Is Boy going to be exiled? Is Sophia going to split the town? Let me know in the comments. And if you like what we're doing, leave a like, subscribe if you already haven't, even share the video if you think someone else might enjoy it. We really appreciate it and it helps us out a lot. Until next time, stay sleuthy.